Olivia Hart pressed her forehead against the cold window of her cramped studio apartment, watching the city lights blur through her tears. The eviction notice lay crumpled on the floor behind her, giving her 30 days to find a miracle. Her 6-year-old daughter Ruby slept peacefully in the corner bed. Unaware that their world was falling apart, the medical bills from Ruby's emergency appendectomy 6 months ago had destroyed everything Olivia had worked for. Despite her nursing degree and years of experience, the hospital where she worked had laid off half the staff during budget cuts. Now, she survived on part-time shifts at a clinic that barely paid minimum wage. Her phone glowed with another rejection email. She had applied to 43 positions in the past 2 weeks. Each rejection felt like a door slamming in her face, locking her and Ruby out of any chance at stability. An unusual opportunity, the notification appeared at midnight. Just as Olivia was about to give up and try to sleep, a job posting unlike any she had seen before. The title read simply, Private Medical Consultant. Immediate placement. Compensation beyond standard. The salary listed made her blink and reread the numbers 3 times. It was more money in 1 month than she currently made in an entire year. But the posting was strange. No company name appeared, only a contact number and strict instructions about discretion. Olivia knew she should be suspicious. Every instinct told her this could be dangerous. But when she looked at Ruby, sleeping with her worn stuffed rabbit clutched to her chest, she knew she had no choice. She composed a careful email, highlighting her medical credentials and ability to maintain patient confidentiality. The response came within 5 minutes. A phone call from a woman named Victoria, whose voice carried the crisp efficiency of someone who expected immediate obedience. Miss Hart, my employer is interested in your qualifications. Can you attend an interview tomorrow at 10 in the morning at the Pinnacle building downtown? Come alone and bring your credentials. The line disconnected before Olivia could ask questions. She stared at her phone, her heart pounding with equal parts hope and fear. The interview, the Pinnacle building, towered over the financial district, its glass facade reflecting the morning sun like a beacon of wealth and power. Olivia wore her best professional outfit, though the blazer was 2 years old and the shoes pinched her feet. She carried her nursing credentials in a folder. Along with references from her previous supervisors, Victoria met her in the marble lobby. A tall woman in her 50s with silver hair pulled back in a perfect bun. She wore a charcoal suit that probably cost more than Olivia paid in rent for 3 months. Follow me. No other greeting, no pleasantries. They rode the elevator to the top floor in silence. The doors opened to a private hallway with only one set of double doors at the end. Victoria knocked twice and entered without waiting for a response. The office beyond was enormous, decorated in dark wood and leather with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a breathtaking view of the entire city. But Olivia barely noticed the view. Her attention fixed on the man behind the massive desk. Julian Mercer was younger than she expected. Perhaps in his late 30s? He had sharp features, dark hair with threads of silver at the temples, and eyes so intensely green they seemed to see straight through her. He wore a black suit with no tie, the top button of his shirt undone, giving him an air of casual authority, somehow more intimidating than formal attire would have been. He studied her for a long moment before speaking, his gaze moving from her face to her worn shoes and back again. Olivia forced herself to stand straight, refusing to show how uncomfortable his scrutiny made her feel. The proposition, sit down. Miss Hart, his voice was low and controlled, the kind of voice that expected compliance. Olivia sat in one of the leather chairs facing his desk, keeping her hands clasped in her lap to hide their trembling. Julian stood and walked to the window, his back to her as he spoke. I have a condition that requires constant medical monitoring. My previous consultant retired, and I need someone with your specific qualifications. Someone discreet, someone desperate enough not to ask too many questions. The bluntness of his words stung. But Olivia kept her expression neutral. What kind of condition? He turned to face her, and she saw something flicker in those green eyes. Pain, perhaps? Or anger? That information will be shared if you accept the position. First, you need to understand the terms. Julian returned to his desk and pulled out a thick document. The salary you saw on the posting is accurate? $15,000 per week, plus full medical coverage for you and your daughter, plus housing in one of my properties. Olivia's breath caught. That kind of money would change everything. She could pay off Ruby's medical bills, save for her future. Never worry about eviction notices again, but there are conditions. Julian's eyes never left her face. You would live on my estate. You would be available at all times. And you would submit to a complete security screening before beginning work. The price of salvation? What kind of security screening? Olivia asked, though part of her already knew the answer would make her uncomfortable. Julian leaned back in his chair, his fingers steepled under his chin. I am worth approximately $12 billion. Miss Hart, I have been the target of kidnapping attempts, corporate espionage, and various other threats. Everyone who enters my home undergoes a thorough examination to ensure they are not carrying tracking devices, recording equipment, or weapons. You mean a physical search? I mean a complete medical examination conducted by my personal physician. Julian's voice remained calm, but his eyes held a challenge. Everything will be documented and handled professionally, but it is mandatory. No exceptions. The room felt suddenly smaller, the air harder to breathe. Olivia thought of Ruby, of the eviction notice, of all the nights she had cried herself to sleep, wondering how she would keep her daughter safe and fed. I have a child. I cannot just leave her. Full childcare will be provided. Ruby will attend Greenwood Academy, one of the best private schools in the state. A qualified nanny will be available whenever you are working. Julian paused. Your daughter will have everything she needs. The way he said it made it sound both generous and ominous, as if he were offering a gift that came with invisible strings attached. The decision Olivia sat in silence, her mind racing through her options. She could walk away, maintain her dignity, and watch her daughter grow up in poverty, moving from one run-down apartment to another. Or she could accept this offer, submit to the humiliation of the security screening, and give Ruby the life she deserved. When she looked up, Julian was watching her with an expression she could not quite read. There was no kindness in his face, but also no cruelty. Just a cold assessment, as if he were calculating her breaking point. If I agree, she began, her voice steadier than she felt, I need to know this is legitimate. I need guarantees in writing. Everything will be in the contract. Julian pulled out another document. You will have 24 hours to review it with a lawyer if you choose. But I need your decision by tomorrow morning. He stood, signaling the interview was over. Victoria will show you out and provide you with the contract. Think carefully, Miss Hart. Once you sign, there is no going back. As Victoria escorted her to the elevator, Olivia clutched the contract to her chest. She knew she had just been offered a deal that would save her daughter's future. But she also knew that Julian Mercer was a man who controlled everything around him with absolute precision. The question was not whether she would accept, the question was what price she would ultimately pay for saying yes. 24 hours later, Olivia stood in a private medical facility, wearing a thin hospital gown and trying to control her shaking hands. The contract she had signed that morning sat in her purse, along with a check for her first week's salary that seemed almost obscene in its amount. Dr. Patricia Winters was professional and kind, explaining each step of the examination with patience, but no amount of kindness could erase the humiliation Olivia felt as she submitted to the most thorough physical screening of her life. Every inch of her body was checked, scanned, and documented. This is necessary for your safety as much as his. Dr. Winters said gently as she made notes on her tablet. Mr. Mercer has survived 3 serious threats in the past 5 years. He trusts no one. When it was finally over, Olivia dressed with trembling fingers. She caught her reflection in the mirror and barely recognized herself. Her eyes looked hollow, defeated. She wondered what kind of man inspired such fear that he required this level of security from a medical consultant. Victoria was waiting outside with her typical efficiency. The car is ready to take you to the estate. Your belongings and Ruby have already been moved. Mr. Mercer expects you both for dinner at 7, the mansion the Mercer estate sprawled across 50 acres of pristine land outside the city. The main house was a modern architectural masterpiece of glass. steel and stone that seemed to rise organically from the landscape. Security cameras tracked their car as they drove through the gates, and Olivia counted at least 6 guards patrolling the grounds. "Your residence is in the West Wing," Victoria explained as they pulled up to the main entrance. "You will have complete privacy, but you are expected to respond to any call from Mr. Mercer within 5 minutes." They were night. The apartment Victoria showed her was larger than any home Olivia had ever lived in. 3 bedrooms, a full kitchen, a living room with a fireplace, and windows overlooking gardens that looked like something from a magazine. Ruby's new bedroom was filled with toys, books, and a canopy bed fit for a princess. "Mommy." Ruby ran into her arms the moment she saw her. "Look at my new room. And Miss Hannah is so nice. She made me cookies." Hannah, a warm woman in her 40s, with kind eyes and a gentle smile, stood in the doorway. "She has been wonderful, Miss Hart. Very polite and curious about everything." Olivia held her daughter close, breathing in the familiar scent of her strawberry shampoo. At least Ruby seemed happy. That was worth something. The first dinner, at 7 sharp, Victoria arrived to escort them to dinner. Ruby held Olivia's hand tightly as they walked through the main house, her eyes wide at the artwork on the walls and the crystal chandeliers. Overhead, Julian waited in a dining room that could seat 30 people, though only 3 places were set at one end of the long table. He had changed from his business suit into dark slacks and a gray sweater that made his eyes look even greener. He stood when they entered, his gaze moving from Olivia to Ruby. "You must be Ruby," he said, and his voice was different, softer, almost gentle. "I am Julian." "Welcome to my home." Ruby, who had inherited her mother's boldness, walked right up to him. "Your house is really big. Do you have a dog?" Something flickered across Julian's face. Surprise, perhaps. "No, I do not have a dog. Would you like one?" Ruby's face lit up. "Really? Can I?" She turned to Olivia. "Mommy, can I have a dog?" "We will see," Olivia said carefully, her eyes meeting Julian's. "That is very generous, but Ruby needs to learn responsibility first." Julian nodded, a hint of what might have been approval in his expression. "A wise approach. Perhaps we can start with something smaller. Do you like fish, Ruby?" The dinner that followed was surreal. Julian was surprisingly good with Ruby, answering her endless questions with patience and even showing glimpses of humor. He told her about the gardens, the swimming pool, the library with thousands of books. He spoke to her as if she were a person worthy of respect, not just a child to be dismissed. But whenever his eyes met Olivia's across the table, she saw something else, a darkness, a warning. As if he were reminding her that all of this comfort came at a price, and he owned every piece of it. The first night after dinner, Olivia tucked Ruby into her new bed, reading her favorite story about a brave little mouse. Ruby fell asleep quickly, exhausted from the excitement of the day. Olivia sat beside her for a long time, watching her daughter's peaceful face and wondering if she had made the right choice. A soft knock on the apartment door made her jump. She opened it to find Julian standing in the hallway, still in his casual clothes, his hands in his pockets. "I need to show you the medical suite," he said without preamble, "and explain my condition now. It is almost 10. The condition does not follow a convenient schedule, Miss Hart. Neither can you." Olivia followed him through the mansion to a private wing she had not seen before. He opened a door with his fingerprint, revealing a fully equipped medical facility that would rival most hospital emergency rooms. Monitors, diagnostic equipment, medications stored in locked cabinets, even a surgical table. "I have a rare cardiac condition," Julian said, his back to her as he gestured around the room. "An arrhythmia that can become life-threatening without warning. I need monitoring twice daily and immediate intervention if an episode occurs." He turned to face her, and for the first time, she saw vulnerability in those green eyes. "My last consultant saved my life 4 times in 3 years. I need to know you are capable of the same." "Breaking the ice, show me your medical file," Olivia said, her professional instincts taking over. "I need to understand the specifics." For the next hour, They reviewed his condition. Julian was surprisingly forthcoming, answering her questions with technical precision. Olivia realized that beneath his cold exterior was a brilliant mind that understood his own body with scientific accuracy. "You should be in a hospital," she said finally. "With this condition, living alone is dangerous. I refuse to live my life in a hospital bed, waiting to die." Julian's voice hardened. "That is why you are here. To give me freedom while keeping me alive, and what happens during an episode?" Olivia pressed. "What do you need from me?" He hesitated, and she saw something she had not expected. Fear. Not of death, but of helplessness. "During an episode, I may lose consciousness. You will need to administer the medication and use the defibrillator if necessary. You may need to touch me to check my pulse. To perform procedures I would normally refuse to allow." The words hung between them, heavy with implication. Olivia suddenly understood the title of the story she found herself living. He was a man who controlled everything, who trusted no one, who could not bear to be vulnerable. And now he was placing his life in her hands. "I understand," she said quietly. "I will do whatever is medically necessary." Nothing more. Something shifted in his expression. Relief, perhaps, or respect. "Good. That is all I require." The first crisis, 3 days later. At 2 a.m, Olivia woke to her phone buzzing urgently. A text from Julian's monitoring system. "Cardiac irregularity detected. Immediate assistance required." She ran through the mansion in her pajamas and robe, her medical training kicking in as she burst into his bedroom. Julian sat on the edge of his bed, one hand pressed to his chest, his face pale and covered in sweat. "Episode," he gasped. Severe Olivia did not hesitate. She checked his pulse, noting the dangerous rhythm. She grabbed the emergency medication from the kit she had prepared and prepared the injection. "This will hurt," she warned. "Just do it." She administered the medication and watched the monitors anxiously. His heart rate remained erratic. She would need to use the defibrillator if it did not stabilize soon. "Julian, look at me." She took his face in her hands, forcing him to focus on her eyes. "Breathe with me. In through your nose, out through your mouth. Let the medication work." For a moment, he just stared at her, his green eyes wide with pain and something else. Then he began to breathe with her, matching her rhythm. Slowly, gradually, his heart rate began to stabilize. They sat like that for 10 minutes, her hands still cradling his face, his breathing synced with hers. When the crisis finally passed, Julian slumped forward, exhausted. "You did well," he whispered. "Thank you." Olivia helped him lie back against the pillows, checking his vital signs one more time. "You need rest. I will stay here tonight, just in case." "That is not necessary. It is medically necessary." She pulled a chair beside his bed. "I am your medical consultant. This is my job." Julian looked at her for a long moment, and she saw something crack in his carefully constructed walls. "No one has stayed," he said quietly. "They always leave when it gets hard. I am not leaving." Olivia settled into the chair. "Go to sleep, Julian. I will be here," as she watched him finally drift into exhausted sleep. Olivia realized that the man she had thought was a heartless billionaire was actually terrified and alone, hiding behind control because he had learned that vulnerability only brought pain. She had come here for money, for Ruby's future. But now she wondered if she had stumbled into something far more complicated than a simple employment arrangement. The weeks that followed changed everything. Olivia settled into a routine of monitoring Julian's health, managing his medications, and being on call for episodes that came without warning. She learned to read the subtle signs before a crisis hit, the way he would press his hand to his chest, the slight pallor that crept into his face, the tension in his shoulders. But she also learned other things. She learned that Julian ate breakfast alone every morning at 6, reading news on 3 different tablets. She learned that he played piano late at night when he could not sleep, his fingers moving over the keys with surprising gentleness. She learned that he donated millions to cardiac research anonymously, funding studies that might one day cure the condition that imprisoned him. Ruby became his unlikely companion. The little girl had no fear of the stern billionaire. And somehow, her innocence pierced through his defenses in ways nothing else could. He taught her chess, let her read in his library, and even bought her the dog he had promised, a golden retriever puppy named Sunny, Olivia. Watched these interactions with growing confusion. The man who had subjected her to humiliating security protocols, who controlled every aspect of her life with iron precision, was gentle with her daughter. He listened to Ruby's stories with genuine interest, helped her with homework, and never once raised his voice in her presence. The truth emerges one evening. After Ruby was asleep, Olivia found Julian in his study, staring at a photograph on his desk. She had never seen it before. Picture of a young woman with kind eyes and a bright smile. "My wife," Julian said without looking up. "Catherine. She died 7 years ago. Cardiac arrest during childbirth. Our daughter lived for 3 hours." Olivia felt her heart shatter. "Julian, I am so sorry. I did not know." He finally looked at her, and his eyes were raw with old grief. "No one knows. I buried the story along with them." He set the photograph down carefully. "I built this fortress, hired guards, implemented security protocols. I told myself it was about protection, about preventing corporate espionage and kidnapping attempts, but really, you were trying to prevent anyone from getting close enough to hurt you again." Julian stood and walked to the window, his back rigid. "After Catherine died, I threw myself into work. I made billions. I built an empire, and I made sure I would never depend on anyone, never need anyone, never love anyone." His voice cracked slightly. Then this heart condition developed. "Punishment, perhaps, for trying to live without a heart, breaking down walls. You are wrong," Olivia said, moving to stand beside him. "You have a heart. I have seen it with Ruby. I have seen it in the research you fund and the way you treat your employees. You are not heartless, Julian. You are scared." He turned to face her, and she saw tears in his eyes for the first time. "I am scared," he admitted. "Scared of dying alone? Scared of letting someone in just to lose them? Scared that I am too broken to ever be whole again without thinking." Olivia reached up and touched his face, the same way she had during his first episode. But this time it was not medical. This time it was human connection, compassion, something neither of them had expected. "You are not broken," she whispered. "You are surviving. There is a difference." Julian covered her hand with his, closing his eyes. "You should stay away from me, Olivia. I will only hurt you. It is all I know how to do, then learn something new." He opened his eyes, and the intensity in his gaze made her breath catch. "I do not know how. Let me teach you." The turning point, the kiss, was inevitable. A collision of loneliness and hope and desperate need for connection. Julian pulled her close with trembling hands, as if he were afraid she might disappear. Olivia felt years of her own walls crumbling. All the barriers she had built to protect herself and Ruby from disappointment and pain. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. Julian rested his forehead against hers. "This is a terrible idea," he whispered. "Probably," Olivia agreed. "But I am tired of being afraid. Are you?" Transformation, the relationship that developed between them, was nothing like Olivia had imagined. Julian did not suddenly become soft or easy. His need for control was too deeply ingrained for that. But he began to let her in, bit by bit, showing her the scared boy beneath the billionaire armor. He told her about growing up poor, about clawing his way to success through sheer determination and ruthless intelligence. He told her about Catherine, about the guilt he carried for not being there when she died. He told her about the years of therapy that taught him to function but never to truly heal. In turn, Olivia shared her own story. The teenage pregnancy that derailed her plans, the father who abandoned her, the years of struggling alone. She told him about the fear that kept her awake at night, the constant worry that she was failing Ruby, the shame of needing help. They healed each other slowly, carefully, like surgeons working on their own wounds. Ruby's wisdom one afternoon. Ruby came running to find them in the garden, Sunny bounding beside her. Julian, I drew you a picture." She thrust a crayon, drawing at him a child's version of their family. 3 stick figures holding hands. A tall man, a woman, The small girl with a golden blob that was presumably the dog. "That is us," Ruby announced proudly. "We are a family now, right?" Julian stared at the drawing, his hands shaking slightly. He looked at Olivia, who saw tears threatening to fall. "May I?" he asked Ruby carefully. "Keep this picture?" "Of course," Ruby beamed. "I made it for you because you are sad sometimes. But families make sad go away." From the mouths of children came the wisdom adults spent lifetimes searching for. The proposal 3 months after Olivia had first walked into Julian's office. He called her to the medical suite. She went nervously, afraid there had been another episode. Instead, she found him standing by the monitors, looking healthier than she had ever seen him. "My condition is stabilized," he said without preamble. "Dr. Winters says I am responding better to treatment than I have in years. She believes it is because my stress levels have decreased significantly." "That is wonderful news," Olivia said, though her heart sank. Did this mean he no longer needed her? She attributes the improvement to having consistent, excellent medical care. Julian paused. And to having a reason to live, he pulled a small box from his pocket. "This is not the proposal you deserve. I should take you somewhere romantic, get down on one knee, make grand speeches. But I am not good at those things. What I am good at is being honest." He opened the box, revealing a simple but beautiful ring. "Olivia Hart, you saved my life. Not just medically, but in every way that matters. You taught me that control is not strength, that vulnerability is not weakness, that letting someone in is not the same as letting them destroy you, Julian." Olivia breathed, her hand going to her mouth. "I am asking you to marry me. Not because I own you or control you, but because I love you. I love your strength and your compassion and your refusal to let me hide behind my walls. I love the way you love Ruby, the way you fight for what is right, the way you see the good in people even when they cannot see it themselves." The answer Olivia looked at this man who had terrified her, controlled her, and ultimately opened himself to her completely. She thought about the journey they had taken, from that first humiliating interview to this moment of genuine vulnerability and love. "Yes," she said simply, "but I have conditions." Julian laughed, a real laugh full of joy and relief. "Of course you do. Name them. No more security screenings for people you care about. No more treating love like a business transaction. And you go to therapy, real therapy, to deal with your grief and your fear." "We both do." "Agreed. Anything else?" Olivia pretended to think. "Ruby gets to name our next dog. Done." He slipped the ring onto her finger and pulled her close. "Thank you for not giving up on me. Thank you for learning how to let me in." The new beginning 6 months later, Olivia and Julian stood in the garden of the estate, surrounded by friends and family. Ruby served as flower girl, her proud smile matching the joy on their faces. Dr. Winters was there, along with Hannah, Victoria, the staff who had watched Julian's transformation with quiet approval. The ceremony was simple, but meaningful. When Julian said his vows, his voice was steady and sure. "I promise to trust you with my heart, even when it is scary. I promise to let you see me at my worst and believe that you will stay. I promise to be the partner you deserve, not the controller I used to be." Olivia's vows were equally powerful. "I promise to be your partner, not your employee. I promise to challenge you when you need it and support you always. I promise to build a life with you based on love, not fear." When they kissed, Ruby cheered loudly, and Sonny barked his approval. The future. That night, after the celebration was over and Ruby was asleep, Olivia and Julian stood on the balcony of their bedroom, looking out at the stars. His arm was around her waist, her head resting on his shoulder. "Are you happy?" he asked quietly. "More than I ever thought possible," Olivia replied. "Are you?" Julian thought about the question. A year ago, he would have said happiness was impossible for him. Now, with this woman beside him and a child who called him Dad and a future that looked bright instead of lonely, he finally understood what it meant to truly live. "I am," he said with wonder in his voice. "I really am." Below them, the estate stretched out in peaceful darkness. What had once been a fortress built to keep the world out had become a home filled with love and laughter and second chances. Julian had learned that true strength came not from control, but from surrender. Not from walls, but from opening doors. And Olivia had learned that sometimes the scariest risks led to the greatest rewards. That beneath harsh exteriors could beat the kindest hearts. And that love could heal even the deepest wounds when given the chance. Together, they'd created something neither could have built alone, a family forged not by blood or obligation, but by choice and courage and the willingness to believe that broken people could become whole again as they stood together under the stars. Julian whispered, "Thank you for seeing me." Olivia smiled and pulled him closer. "Thank you for letting me. It was not a fairy tale ending. Real life never is. There would still be struggles ahead, moments of fear and doubt, and old patterns threatening to resurface. But they would face those challenges together, as partners, as equals. As two people who had found each other in the darkness and chosen to walk toward the light